much business is the Snap partnership driving or going to drive?
Well, it will roll out later today on iOS, and so it's too early to tell. But music is fundamentally a social experience, and the ability to share it on Snap now, the first time for Snap to be doing something with a music partner, I think is pretty meaningful.
So Instagram has a close relationship with Spotify. As I mentioned, Spotify has a close relationship with Facebook. Is that why you picked Snap or chose to partner with Snap?
Well, we chose Snap because they have a younger listener base who's very, younger listeners tend to be more engaged with music. And it was the big social media platform that really hadn't enabled music sharing in the way that we thought we could really do something unique with.
So talk to us about, look, Pandora has been going through a lot lately, a lot of executive turnover, this big investment from Sirius. How have things changed since then? Because investors were hoping for a buyout.
Yeah, well, all that happened before I joined. Mm-hmm. So last year did go through a lot of turnover, which led to me joining the company in September. And it's really settled down quite a lot since then. So we closed the SiriusXM investment right at the time I was joining. And since then, we've really refocused the company on a couple things. One is, we are, as you mentioned, the largest music streaming service in the U.S. 70% of our revenues come from advertising. Digital audio advertising is the one big digital advertising business that's not controlled by Google or Facebook. Pandora is actually the largest in that. So we've been investing in that. We bought a company called AdsWiz, which is the leader in audio programmatic, which really helps us, really invest in our strength of digital audio while we continue to grow our subscription business nicely.
Now, there's been this perennial question of whether Pandora is a standalone company or an acquisition target. Is it a wait and see? Is that something you're open to, or do you see Pandora going it alone?
I can certainly see why other companies would find Pandora attractive, because there are a few companies that have the scale of Pandora. But our strategy is to build on our core strengths. And we are, as I mentioned, the largest in digital audio advertising, and we're investing in that and continue to grow that revenue base and with the investments that we're making, while we also grow our subscription business.
And yet you have Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, all chasing music with minimal profits. What is your strategy for profitability?
Yeah, again, it's, if you think about consumers, they're not homogenous. Not every consumer is going to pay a subscription. Most will consume music with an ad-supported, like they do on terrestrial radio today, which is a $16 billion marketplace, still waiting to be migrated away from traditional broadcast to IP streaming. And Pandora is really well positioned for that. So when we think about competition, of course we think about Spotify and Apple for our subscription business. But remember, 70% of our revenue is advertising. And that's more of our competition there is really more about terrestrial radio.
But what's the plan if artists start to really push buying their albums on paid streaming services?
That's great for our business. Our paid streaming services last quarter grew 63% year over year. So, it's a fast-growing part of our business, and but again, we think consumers some will choose ad-supported, some will choose subscription, and we're really well positioned because we're strong in both of them.
Do you think content costs will continue to go up?
I think that there's a moderating effect that's happening now, and we see it as the platforms start to gain more scale in streaming, and it's really to the benefit of the industry, because you're now seeing the music industry finally growing again after 15, 18 years of declines.
It's been a long time.
It's growing, and it's growing because of streaming. And so I think that there's a balance that's being found now between labels, publishers, and streaming services that understand that it needs to be a healthy ecosystem, because it is the future of the industry.
That said, listener hours were still down in the first quarter. When do you see that turning around?
I think that we have a big opportunity to grow engagement. So not just listeners, but also hours with our listeners. And that's a combination of what we do on the marketing front, what we do with our product and new features, like we've launched personalized playlists and premium access that lets any listener, whether you're ad supported or not, play any song. And those things start to move the needle for us on engagement.
So do you think you could turn them around by the end of the year?
I think that we're going to start to see improvements in that. And we'll continue, just like last quarter, we saw an improvement in, yes, it was still a decline from the prior year, but it was a big improvement over the prior quarter. And we expect to continue to be able to make improvements on engagement.
Spotify pitches data as its differentiation. What do you think Pandora's differentiation is? You know, it used to be that sort of lean back listening ability, but now it almost seems that listeners want something different.
I think they want something additional. So certainly data is at the core of Pandora. I mean, Pandora invented how you use data to program music through the Music Genome Project. And it's why the engagement on Pandora is so much higher than any other music service. That hours listened per listener, it is way beyond any of our competitors. And that's all driven by data. But that data also drives our advertising business, which again, 70% of our revenues, and that's a big differentiation for us. So we actually have a business that can be quite a profitable business in our advertising, rather than some of our competitors who really use a free service only as a funnel into subscription.
Tencent has a relationship with Snap that goes way back. You now have a relationship with Snap. How do you think the Tencent music IPO will change the industry?
I think it will in a similar way to what we saw with Spotify, which is a lot more focus on really what's happening in the music industry and streaming and the opportunities and the growth opportunities. I mean, I think Tencent will put more of a focus on what the international growth opportunities are, but all of these companies coming to market, I think, really serve one broad thing, which is this is a growth industry, and there's lots of opportunity, and we're in the first inning of it.
And what's your continued roadmap for international growth?
Right.
Asia and beyond.
Well, the Pandora service today is only available in the U.S., but we just completed an acquisition of a company called AdsWiz, which is the largest digital audio programmatic advertising business in the world. They operate in 39 countries, and as I mentioned earlier, I think programmatic and digital audio advertising is a growth business that's going to exist for a long time, principally because of the shifts that we'll see from terrestrial radio to streaming, and much of which will be monetized for advertising. AdsWiz is at the core of that. We just completed that acquisition. That gives us growth opportunities globally based on digital audio advertising.
So how should we expect to see revenue growth as a result of that AdsWiz acquisition?
Well, it's still a fairly early stage business, although it's growing rather rapidly. Their revenues relative to the size of Pandora are still quite small, so it'll take some time until it starts moving the needle on Pandora. But we know that we're in the right space for a long period of growth.
Home speakers are exploding. Amazon has seen subscriptions go up for its music business as a result of Amazon Echo. Do you see potential there for Pandora to see growth as a result of this home speaker explosion?
It's the fastest growing segment for us on Pandora, and listening on those smart speakers has more than doubled in the last year, and we see no end in that. But again, if you think about what the content that's consumed through speakers, a lot of it is music, some of it's non-music, some of it will be subscription, some will be advertising, but there's no display. So there's not a display ad or video ad that'll be served. It'll have to be an audio ad, which we're really well positioned for, both with AdsWiz and our core service.
Any speakers in particular favored by Pandora listeners?
Well, we see really high use on Echo and Alexa. So that but they're the largest and they were the earliest. Sonos is also, I think over half of Sonos listeners listen to Pandora each month. So Pandora is very strong on Sonos.
What about HomePod?
HomePod, well, as you know,
not because of Apple.
Apple has given their music service preference on that, and there haven't been that many sold yet. So it's a little hard to, you can still use Pandora on it. It's a little clunkier than using the Apple experience, but it's a little too early to tell what will happen with that because the numbers are still small.
What does the future look like for you in this very crowded market between Spotify and Apple Music? Will there be more partnerships like we saw Spotify partner with Hulu?
Yeah.
What is the strategy?
Yeah, absolutely more. Oh, you also just saw us partner with AT&T. So we just announced in the last several weeks a partnership with them where you can get, if you're an unlimited AT&T wireless customer, you can get Pandora premium service for free with your subscription. So I'm a big believer in partnerships to drive your business. What I've found in other companies I've run is you get your best customers through partnerships. It's the lowest cost of acquiring them, and they tend to be the highest value customers. So you'll definitely see more partnership activity with us. So
if we do this again in a year, what kind of progress will you be talking about?
I think we'll be talking about the growth of digital audio advertising as a format. I think that's going to become a big theme, certainly within the next year. You'll continue to see our subscription business growing nicely, and you'll see a lot more partnership and a lot more expansion on the content side for us.
What kind of content?
Well, audio content principally, but beyond just music. So we're expanding more into podcasts. We want to do for podcasts what we did for music, which is really create discovery in a really highly personalized way, which doesn't exist for podcasts today. Most podcasts people find on a chart. There's nothing personalized about a chart. But think about what Pandora did for music discovery. We'll do that for podcasts. And then, because of our capabilities around monetization for digital audio, we have the ability to really change the podcast industry for monetization.